The sky above Karen 9 burned with dark red fire. Smoke covered the broken cities, and giant warships fell from the clouds like dying stars. For 6 years, humans and the Varkal Empire fought across the galaxy. Millions were already dead. Entire planets had turned into graveyards. And Karen 9 was supposed to be the final battlefield. But something on this planet was far worse than war. Captain Elias Varn walked carefully through the ruined streets with 6 human soldiers behind him. Broken machines covered the roads. Destroyed tanks still burned beside collapsed buildings. And cold wind carried ash through the empty city. Nobody spoke much. The planet felt wrong, too quiet. Even the enemy soldiers had disappeared. Sergeant Cole checked his scanner again and frowned. "Sir, I'm not detecting any life signs nearby." Elias looked around the destroyed streets. "That's impossible," he said quietly. 3 hours earlier, thousands of enemy troops were fighting here. Now the entire city looked dead. Suddenly a loud metallic sound echoed somewhere far below the ground. The soldiers instantly raised their rifles. Everyone froze. Then silence returned again. Private Mira swallowed nervously. "I don't like this place," before Elias could answer. Another sound reached them. Very soft, very weak. A child crying. The soldiers looked at each other in confusion. "That can't be real," Cole whispered. But the crying continued, small, scared, alone. Elias slowly followed the sound through the ruins, stepping over broken metal and shattered glass, until they reached the remains of a massive underground facility hidden beneath the city. Half of the entrance had collapsed during the battle. Strange symbols covered the metal walls, and above the broken security door, red warning lights still flashed again and again. Project Seraph activated. The air inside felt freezing cold. One soldier quietly muttered, "What kind of place is this?" Nobody answered. The team moved deeper into the underground halls, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. Sparks fell from damaged ceiling wires, and broken laboratory doors lined both sides of the corridor. Then they found the bodies, scientists, dozens of them. None of them carried weapons. Some looked terrified even after death. Others looked like they tried to escape. But the strangest thing was the damage around them. The metal walls were bent inward like something impossible had crushed them. Private Mira stared at the scene nervously. This wasn't done by bombs. Elias knelt beside one dead scientist and noticed deep burn marks across the floor, as if pure energy exploded inside the room. Then the child cried again, closer this time. The sound came from behind a giant reinforced door at the end of the hallway. The words on the door made everyone uneasy. "Biological containment area." Sergeant Cole immediately raised his rifle. "Sir, we should leave." But Elias stepped toward the door. The control panel was destroyed from the inside. Something had escaped. Slowly, the heavy door opened with a loud metallic groan. Cold air rushed from the chamber. The room beyond looked enormous. Broken glass tubes stood everywhere. Wires hung from the ceiling. Strange machines sparked in the darkness, and warning alarms still flashed red across the walls. Then Elias saw her, a small alien girl sitting alone beside a shattered glass container. She looked no older than 8 years old. Long silver hair covered part of her face. Metal chains still hung from her thin arms. Her bare feet touched the cold floor carefully, and her glowing white eyes slowly turned toward the humans. Nobody moved, nobody even breathed. The scanners on the soldiers' armor suddenly screamed loudly. Warning: unknown bioweapon detected. Every soldier aimed their weapon instantly. Private Mira's hands shook. Oh God! But the little girl did not attack. She only stared at them silently. Fear filled her eyes. Not anger, not hate, fear. Then Elias noticed something strange. The entire room temperature was dropping quickly. Ice slowly formed along the metal walls. Lights flickered above them. The girl looked terrified by the weapons pointed at her. One nervous soldier tightened his finger on the trigger. The little girl suddenly moved backward and covered her head weakly. "Please," she whispered softly. Her voice sounded broken. "Don't hurt me again." The soldiers froze. Elias lowered his rifle slightly. The child looked injured. Bruises covered her arms. Fresh scars marked her skin. This was not how soldiers treated a weapon. This was how monsters treated a prisoner. Then suddenly the entire underground facility shook violently. Alarms screamed louder than before. Cole checked his scanner and his face lost all color. "Captain, what is it?" The soldier looked up slowly. "There are no enemy life signs on this planet anymore," Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Cole's voice became quiet. "I mean, there are none." Then he looked directly at the frightened little girl sitting alone beside the broken glass tube. And for the first time, everyone in the room understood the terrible truth. Something inside this child had destroyed an entire army. The human warship Valkyrie drifted silently through deep space, far away from the burning world of Karen 9. Its engines glowed softly against the darkness, while inside the ship, fear slowly spread through every hallway. Not because of enemy ships, not because of the war, because of the child sleeping inside the medical room. Captain Elias Varn stood outside the door with his arms crossed, watching through the glass window quietly. The small alien girl sat alone on the bed, knees against her chest, silver hair covering part of her face. She had not spoken much since leaving the planet, but strange things kept happening around her. Machines stopped working when she became scared, lights flickered when she cried, and every electronic system near her acted strangely. Even the ship's eye sometimes shut down for a few seconds whenever she looked nervous. The crew tried staying away from her. Nobody trusted her. Nobody understood her. Sergeant Cole walked beside Elias slowly. "The men are afraid," he said quietly. Elias did not look away from the window. "She's just a child," Cole frowned. "Sir," an entire Varkal army disappeared around her. Inside the room, the little girl looked toward them suddenly, almost like she heard everything. Then she quickly lowered her eyes again. Elias opened the door carefully and stepped inside alone. The girl instantly moved backward against the wall. Fear filled her glowing white eyes. Elias placed a small tray of food near the bed and slowly stepped back. "You should eat," he said calmly. The girl stared at the food carefully, like she had never seen something like it before. For several seconds, she did not move. Then slowly, very carefully, she picked up a small piece of bread. Her hands trembled slightly. She took one bite, then another. And suddenly she started eating very fast, like someone who had not eaten properly in a very long time. Elias watched silently. The child stopped suddenly after noticing him looking at her. "Why?" she asked softly. Elias frowned slightly. "Why what?" Her voice almost disappeared into silence. "Why are you helping me?" The question hit harder than Elias expected, not because of the words, but because of how confused she sounded, as if kindness itself made no sense to her. Elias pulled a chair closer and sat quietly. "In human space," he said softly. "We don't leave children behind." The girl stared at him silently, like she was trying to understand something impossible. Then suddenly the lights above them flickered hard. Warning alarms flashed for 1 second before disappearing. The girl immediately became nervous. "I'm sorry," she whispered quickly. The room temperature started dropping again. Ice slowly formed across the metal walls. Elias noticed panic growing in her eyes. "Relax," he said calmly. "You're safe here. Safe." The word seemed unfamiliar to her. Slowly, the freezing air stopped spreading. The lights returned to normal. Far away on the command deck, technicians nervously checked the systems again. "This is impossible," one officer muttered. "She's affecting the entire ship without touching anything." Meanwhile, inside the medical room, Elias noticed scars across the child's arms again. Not battle scars, experiment scars. Small surgical marks covered her skin. His expression darkened. "Who did this to you?" The little girl became completely silent. For several moments, she only stared at the floor. Then quietly she whispered, "They made me hurt people." Elias felt cold anger rise inside him. "They?" "The scientists," she answered softly. Images flashed through her mind. Bright white rooms, chains, screaming alarms. "Pain, always pain. They said I was born wrong," she whispered. Her small hand started shaking. "They said I was useful only as a weapon." Suddenly every monitor inside the room glitched violently. Warning screens flashed red across the walls. The ship HFY shut down completely for 3 full seconds. Crew members across the Valkyrie froze nervously. One engineer whispered, "What the hell is she?" Then everything returned to normal again. Inside the room, the little girl looked terrified by what she had done. "I didn't mean to," she whispered quickly. Elias stood slowly and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. The child froze completely. Nobody had touched her kindly before, not once. "You don't need to be afraid anymore," Elias said quietly. For the first time since Karen 9, the little girl looked directly into his eyes, and slowly, very slowly, her fear weakened just a little. Then suddenly the entire ship shook violently. Warning sirens exploded across every hallway. Red emergency lights activated instantly. The bridge officer's voice echoed through the ship. Unknown vessels detected entering the sector. Elias immediately turned toward the door. "How many?" The answer came seconds later. 27 enemy warships. Inside the medical room, the little girl's face lost all color, because deep inside, she already knew who had come for her. Deep space around the Valkyrie looked silent and empty. Endless darkness stretched across every direction. Cold stars glowed far away, and for a short moment, the human crew hoped the enemy fleet had lost them. Then the first explosion hit. The entire ship shook violently. Warning sirens screamed across every hallway. Crew members grabbed the walls as sparks exploded from the ceiling. On the command bridge, Captain Elias Varn stared at the tactical screen with a dark expression. 27 Varkal warships surrounded them from every side. They had been hunted. A frightened officer looked up from the scanner station. "Captain." "They're not attacking normally," Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" The officers swallowed nervously. "They're trying to disable the ship, not destroy it." Everyone on the bridge understood why immediately. The enemy did not come for humans, they came for the child. Another blast struck the Valkyrie harder this time. Lights flickered violently. Far below the bridge, inside the medical room, the little alien girl sat frozen on the bed while the ship trembled around her. Fear slowly filled her glowing white eyes. She recognized the enemy signal. The Varkal Empire had found her again. The door opened suddenly. Elias entered quickly. "We need to move," he said calmly. The girl immediately stepped backward against the wall. "No," she whispered weakly. "They came because of me." Elias ignored the fear in her voice and held out his hand. "You're coming with me." For a second, she stared at his hand silently. Then another explosion shook the ship violently. Without thinking, she grabbed his hand tightly. The moment her small fingers touched him, Elias noticed something strange. Her hand felt freezing cold. Together they moved through the emergency hallways, while red alarms flashed across the walls. Crew members rushed toward battle stations. Some stared nervously at the little girl as she passed. Others looked away completely. Nobody knew whether she was a child or a disaster waiting to happen. Suddenly, the ship lights died completely. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Only emergency red lights remained. Then a voice echoed through the communication system. "Cold, distorted alien. Attention human vessel. Return subject 0 immediately, and your crew may survive." The little girl stopped walking instantly. Her body trembled hard. Elias looked down at her carefully. "Subject 0? He asked quietly. The child lowered her eyes slowly. "That's what they called me," she whispered. Before Elias could speak again, gunfire suddenly exploded somewhere deeper inside the ship. The enemy had boarded them. Human soldiers immediately rushed through the corridors. Blaster fire lit the darkness blue and red. Screams echoed through the metal halls. The Varkal hunters moved fast. Tall armored figures with glowing helmets and heavy plasma rifles. They ignored wounded humans completely, searching only for one target, her. Elias pulled the child behind cover as plasma shots burned across the hallway walls. Sergeant Cole appeared beside them holding a rifle. "They breached Deck 7, he shouted. "There's too many." Another explosion shook the corridor. The child covered her ears tightly. Fear spread across her face again, and suddenly every electronic light near her began flickering violently. The walls themselves hummed strangely. Cole noticed immediately. "Oh no!" The temperature dropped fast. Ice formed across the floor beneath the child's feet. One nearby soldier looked terrified. "Captain, she's losing control." Then heavy footsteps echoed from the darkness ahead. 3 Varkal hunters appeared slowly through the smoke, their weapons aimed directly at the little girl. One hunter spoke coldly. "Subject 0. You will return with us immediately." The child's breathing became uneven. Elias stepped in front of her instantly. "She's not going anywhere." The hunter tilted his head slightly. "You do not understand what she is. Human. She destroyed entire civilizations during testing." Another hunter spoke. "Millions died because of her power." Behind Elias, the little girl looked completely frozen. Tears slowly filled her glowing eyes. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, she asked, "Am I a monster?" For 1 second, nobody moved, not the soldiers, not the hunters, not even Elias. Then the captain answered calmly, "No." The hunters immediately opened fire. Human soldiers returned fire instantly. Blue plasma blasts exploded across the corridor. Metal walls melted from the heat. Elias grabbed the child and pulled her behind cover while the battle erupted around them. But the girl no longer looked at the fighting. She stared only at her own shaking hands, fear, pain, memories, white laboratory rooms. Scientists screaming, planets burning. Her breathing became faster and faster. The lights around the hallway exploded one by one. Every electronic system started failing. The Varkal hunters suddenly realized what was happening. One of them shouted in panic, "Stop her!" Too late. The child lifted her head slowly. Her glowing white eyes suddenly became brighter than before. A deep invisible force exploded through the hallway. Every weapon stopped firing instantly. The Varkal soldiers froze completely. Then their armor began crushing inward like invisible hands were squeezing metal itself. Human soldiers backed away in horror. The walls cracked. The air itself vibrated violently, and outside the Valkyrie, one entire enemy warship suddenly disappeared from the stars. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone. Silence filled the corridor. Smoke drifted slowly through broken lights. The little girl stood shaking in the center of the destruction. Tears rolled silently down her face. Then her small voice finally broke the silence. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." 3 days passed after the battle inside the Valkyrie. 3 long days where nobody truly relaxed. The human crew repaired damaged systems, cleaned burned hallways, and quietly spoke about the impossible thing they had witnessed. An enemy warship had vanished completely. Not exploded, not damaged, erased. And the small alien child was the reason. Some crew members feared her more than ever. Others simply avoided looking at her. But Captain Elias Varn treated her differently. He still spoke calmly to her, still brought her meals himself, still looked at her like she was only a child, not a weapon. Early one quiet morning, Elias found her sitting alone near one of the observation windows. Deep space stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Stars moved slowly across the darkness, and soft blue light reflected in her glowing white eyes. She looked smaller somehow, less dangerous, almost lonely. Elias walked beside her and placed a warm drink carefully near her hands. The child stared at the cup curiously. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Coffee," Elias answered. She tilted her head slightly. "Humans drink this?" "Too much," Elias said quietly. For the first time, the little girl smiled very slightly. A tiny smile, but real, Elias noticed immediately. And somehow that small moment felt more important than any battle he had ever survived. The girl slowly looked back toward the stars. After several quiet seconds, she asked, "Why are humans not afraid of me?" Elias leaned against the wall beside her. "Oh, humans are afraid," he answered honestly. "Then why stay near me?" Because she deserved the truth. Because being afraid of someone is not the same as abandoning them. The little girl stayed silent after hearing that, as if her mind could not fully understand those words. Somewhere deep inside her memories, nobody had ever stayed, nobody except him. Later that day, Elias brought her into the main cafeteria for the first time. The moment the crew saw her enter, conversations immediately stopped. Forks froze in midair. Nobody smiled, nobody welcomed her. The child instantly noticed the fear around her. She lowered her eyes and quietly moved closer behind Elias, like she wanted to disappear. Elias ignored the silence and calmly sat at one of the tables. After several uncomfortable seconds, Sergeant Cole slowly walked over carrying a food tray. The large soldier looked nervous, but he sat down anyway. The child watched him carefully. Cole cleared his throat awkwardly. "So, you got a name?" The girl hesitated, then slowly shook her head. The table became quiet again. Finally, Elias spoke. "You should have one." She looked confused. "A name?" "Humans use names," Elias explained softly. The child thought carefully for a few seconds, then looked toward Elias. "Can humans give names?" Elias almost smiled. "Sometimes." After another long silence, he finally said, "What about Lyra?" The little girl repeated the word quietly, "Lyra," almost like she was testing how it sounded. Then very slowly, she nodded, and for the first time in her life, the weapon called Subject Zero became someone else. She became Lyra. Days slowly passed after that, and little by little, strange changes began happening across the ship. Crew members still feared her powers, but they also started seeing something unexpected. Lyra was kind. She quietly helped injured crew members in the medical bay. She carried tools for engineers repairing broken systems. And once, when a young soldier injured his hand badly, Lyra carefully sat beside him until the pain stopped. Nobody understood how she did it, but machines around her became calm whenever she wanted to help instead of hurt. Even the ship itself almost seemed peaceful near her now. One evening, Elias found Lyra sitting on the floor beside the ship's artificial garden. She watched small green plants carefully. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. Lyra touched one leaf gently. "Watching life," she whispered. Elias sat beside her quietly. After a moment, Lyra asked something strange. "What is family?" The question hit him unexpectedly. Elias stayed silent for several seconds. Finally, he answered softly, "Family means people who stay beside you, even when things become difficult." Lyra looked down at her hands quietly, then asked, "Like you?" Elias looked at her small, frightened face, and for the first time since finding her on Karen 9, he realized something dangerous. He was starting to care about her deeply, not as a mission, not as a responsibility, but as a daughter. Before Elias could answer, warning alarms suddenly echoed across the ship again. Crew members immediately rushed through nearby hallways. Coleys exploded through the communication system. "Captain to bridge, immediately." Elias stood up fast. What happened? The answer came seconds later. Long-range scanners just detected a massive fleet entering the sector. Fear spread across the ship instantly. Elias looked toward the nearest tactical screen, and his blood turned cold. Over 100 Varkal warships surrounded the area. An entire invasion fleet, not for humans, for Lyra. The little girl stared silently at the screen showing endless enemy ships. Then quietly, almost fearfully, she asked one small question. "They're going to kill everyone because of me, aren't they?" Red warning lights flooded every hallway of the Valkyrie. Alarm sirens echoed through the ship without stopping, and fear spread across the crew faster than fire. 100 Varkal warships surrounded them in complete silence. No negotiation, no warning. Only one message repeated again and again across every communication channel. "Surrender Subject Zero, or humanity will be erased." On the command bridge, Captain Elias Varn stared at the massive enemy fleet displayed across the tactical screen. The numbers alone felt impossible. Cruisers, destroyers, battle carriers, enough firepower to destroy entire planets, and all of it had come for one small child. Behind him, officers spoke nervously while preparing emergency battle plans. "We can't survive this," one officer whispered. Another looked toward Elias carefully. "Captain, maybe we should consider handing her over." The bridge became silent immediately. Elias slowly turned toward the officer, his expression cold. "No," the answer came instantly. Without hesitation, the officer lowered his eyes quietly. Nobody argued again, because everyone already understood something important. The captain would rather die than abandon Lyra. Far below the bridge, Lyra sat alone inside the observation room, staring silently at the endless enemy fleet outside the window. Her glowing white eyes reflected hundreds of warships moving through the darkness. She looked calm, but inside, fear slowly crushed her. This always happened. People died because of her. Worlds burned because of her. Maybe the Empire was right all along. Maybe she truly was a monster. The door behind her opened softly. Elias entered carrying 2 cups of warm coffee. Lyra looked down immediately. "You should not stay near me," she whispered. Elias placed 1 cup beside her carefully. "Too late for that," he answered. She did not smile this time. Outside the window, enemy ships continued surrounding the Valkyrie like hungry wolves. "They will kill you because of me," Lyra said quietly. Elias crossed his arms and stood beside her. They picked the wrong humans to threaten. For a moment, Lyra looked confused again. Then softly she asked, "Why are humans like this?" "Like what?" "You protect things even when it hurts you." Elias looked toward the stars outside. "Because someone once protected us too," he answered quietly. Lyra stared at him silently, still trying to understand kindness, still trying to understand why humans kept choosing compassion over fear. Suddenly the ship shook violently. The first enemy attack had begun. Explosions thundered across the hull. Bridge officers shouted through communication systems. Enemy fighters flooded toward the Valkyrie from every direction. The battle started instantly. Human defense cannons fired blue energy beams across space while Varkal ships answered with heavy plasma strikes. Entire sections of the Valkyrie trembled under the bombardment. Inside the observation room, Lyra grabbed the edge of the table tightly. Her fear returned immediately, and nearby electronic systems started malfunctioning again. Lights flickered violently. Screens glitched. Metal walls hummed strangely. Elias noticed her breathing becoming uneven. "Lyra," he said calmly. "Look at me." She tried, but outside the window, human ships exploded one after another. Crew members were dying because of her. Then suddenly a horrifying sound echoed across the communication system. Enemy boarding ships approaching Deck 4. The Varkal wanted to capture her alive. Elias grabbed his rifle immediately. "Stay here," he ordered. But Lyra stood up suddenly. "No," she whispered. Her glowing eyes slowly brightened. "I'm tired of hiding." Before Elias could stop her, the entire room shook violently again. A nearby human cruiser exploded outside the window. Dozens of escape pods scattered into space. Lyra stared at the destruction silently. And something inside her finally changed. Not anger, not hatred, pain, deep unbearable pain. She slowly walked toward the center of the room. Every light around her began glowing white. The air itself vibrated softly. Elias realized immediately what was happening. "Lyra, stop." But she could already feel the enemy machines surrounding the ship. Thousands of weapons, thousands of signals, thousands of minds connected through technology, and for the first time, she understood her power completely. She was never designed only to destroy. She was designed to control, outside the Valkyrie. Dozens of enemy fighters suddenly stopped moving. Then entire Varkal ships began shutting down one by one. Weapons failed, engines died. Communication systems collapsed across the battlefield. Panic spread instantly through the enemy fleet. "What is happening? Our systems are failing. We lost weapon control." Human crews stared in disbelief as giant enemy warships drifted helplessly through space. Lyra's eyes now glowed like white fire. Thin lines of energy moved across her skin painfully. Blood slowly ran from her nose. The power was hurting her badly, but she kept going. More enemy ships shut down. More weapons died. The Varkal fleet slowly fell into chaos. Inside the room, Elias grabbed her shoulders carefully. "Lyra, enough!" She looked at him weakly. Tears filled her glowing eyes. "If I stop, they kill everyone." Then suddenly her body collapsed forward. The glowing energy vanished instantly. Every light returned to normal. Elias caught her before she hit the floor. "Medical team now." He shouted. Crew members rushed into the room seconds later, but one medic immediately froze after checking her heartbeat. The man looked up slowly, fear filling his face. "Captain." Elias tightened his grip on Lyra protectively. "What?" The medic swallowed hard. Her heart is shutting down. Space above the Valkyrie had turned into a silent graveyard. Hundreds of Varkal warships drifted without power. Engines dead, weapons offline, and entire fleets floating like broken metal in the dark. For the first time in the history of the war, the Varkal Empire was not winning, it was panicking, inside the human ship. Alarms still echoed, but now they were different, not battle warnings. Medical alerts. Captain Elias Varn ran through the corridor carrying Lyra in his arms. Her small body felt cold and weak, her breathing was shallow, and faint traces of glowing energy still flickered under her skin. Every soldier they passed stepped aside in silence. No one spoke, no one argued anymore, because the impossible had just happened. The weapon the Empire feared had saved them all, and now she was dying because of it. The medical bay doors opened automatically as the team rushed in. Nurses and doctors were already waiting. "Put her here," one medic shouted. Elias gently placed Lyra on the treatment bed. Machines immediately attached to her arms and chest, but the monitors reacted strangely, beeping, then freezing, then restarting again. Like the ship itself could not understand her body. One doctor looked at the screen and froze. I've never seen readings like this. Her energy levels were unstable. Her biology was partially artificial, and something inside her was still connected to the destroyed ships outside. Sergeant Cole stood near the door, watching silently. Even he looked shaken now. "She shut down an entire fleet," he whispered, "and it killed her to do it." Inside the medical bed, Lyra's fingers moved slightly. Elias quickly stepped closer. "Lyra, stay with me," he said softly. Her glowing eyes opened slowly, but they were dim now. "I stopped them," she whispered weakly. Elias nodded. "Yes, you did." Outside the medical bay window, human crew members gathered quietly in the hallway. Some were injured, some were covered in ash from battle, but all of them were watching the same thing. The child who should have been a weapon, but chose to protect them instead. Suddenly, long-range scanners activated across the ship. A new signal appeared on every screen, far stronger than before. The entire bridge went silent. Cole's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this." Elias hesitated for only a second before walking out. The main tactical screen showed the truth. The Varkal fleet was not retreating, it was regrouping. And now it had doubled in size. More than 200 warships were entering the sector. But this time, something was different. A massive command vessel appeared at the center, far larger than anything before, and it began broadcasting across all channels. A deep, cold voice filled the ship. "You have used Subject Zero. You have broken the balance of creation." Elias clenched his fists. The voice continued, "Return the asset immediately, or we will erase your species completely." On the bridge, tension exploded instantly. "They're not scared anymore," Cole said quietly. "They're angry." Back in the medical bay, Lyra slowly sat up, despite her condition. She stared at the screen through the glass wall. She saw it too, the final fleet, the real command center of the Varkal Empire. The ones who created her. Elias entered quickly. "No," he said immediately. "You are not going back out there." Lyra looked at him weakly. "If I don't, they will destroy you." Elias stepped closer. "And if you do, you die." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of distant battle preparations echoed through the ship. Then Lyra whispered something almost too soft to hear. "I was made to die anyway." Elias shook his head firmly. "No, you were not made for anything they said." The medical staff suddenly stepped back as Lyra's body started glowing faintly again. But this time it was different. Not violent, not unstable, controlled. The monitors stabilized for the first time. One scientist whispered in shock. "She's adapting." Lyra looked at her hands quietly. "I can feel them," she said. "The command ship. It's calling me." Elias immediately moved in front of her. "Don't listen." But Lyra shook her head slowly. "This is not control," she whispered. "It's memory." Suddenly the ship trembled again. But not from attack. From something else. All screens across the Valkyrie flickered at the same time. And a hidden transmission activated. A recording buried deep inside Lyra's mind was now broadcasting itself into space. The Varkal command ship responded instantly. A new voice appeared, older, colder. "I see you are awake." "Seraph." Lyra froze completely. Elias looked at her. "Seraph?" he repeated. Her voice broke slightly. "That was my first name." Silence fell across the entire ship, because everyone now understood something terrifying. This was not just a war for a child. This was a war for the origin of a weapon that could end civilizations. And the ones who built her were finally coming to take her back. Space outside the Valkyrie turned completely silent again. No explosions, no movement. Even the drifting Varkal ships stopped firing and held position like they were waiting for something far worse than battle. At the center of the enemy formation, the massive command vessel slowly moved forward. Its shadow covered entire sections of space. On every human screen, the same name appeared in encrypted form. Project Origin ship inside the human bridge. Captain Elias Varn stood motionless, staring at the tactical display. The final stage of the war had arrived, but it no longer felt like a war. It felt like a judgment. Far below, the medical bay was quiet, too quiet. Lyra stood near the glass window, watching the enemy ship approach slowly. Her glowing eyes were no longer shaking with fear. Something inside her had changed. The fear was still there, but now it was buried under something stronger, understanding. Elias entered the room slowly. He already knew what she was going to do. "No," he said immediately. Lyra did not look away from the window. "They are calling me," she whispered. Elias stepped closer. "Then ignore them." For a moment, she stayed silent. Then softly she said, "I can't." The lights in the medical bay flickered once, not violently, but like a heartbeat responding to her emotions. Outside, the enemy command ship opened a massive circular structure on its surface. A signal beam extended across space, straight toward the Valkyrie, and toward Lyra. Every monitor on the ship suddenly displayed the same message. "Return to origin." Sergeant Cole ran into the room. "Captain, they're locking onto her directly." Elias turned sharply. "Break the signal." "We can't," Cole answered. "It's not technology. It's connected to her brain." Lyra slowly placed her hand against the glass window. And in that moment, she saw everything. Not just the fleet, not just the war, but her origin. White laboratories floating in orbit. Countless identical chambers. Children with glowing eyes like hers. And silence after every test. Elias saw her expression change instantly. "Lyra?" he asked carefully. Her voice came out broken. "They are not coming to kill me," she whispered. "They are coming to wake me up." Suddenly, the entire Valkyrie shook violently again. But this time, it was not an attack from outside. It was something inside her. Emergency systems screamed across the ship. II systems collapsed for 3 seconds, and every screen across the ship turned white. The enemy command ship spoke again, but this time the voice was closer, inside her mind. "Seraph unit," it said. "Final phase is required." Lyra clutched her head in pain. Elias rushed forward and held her shoulders. "Fight it," he shouted, but Lyra shook her head slowly. "I don't know how." Her body began glowing again, brighter than before, but this time it was different from the battle in space. This was controlled, structured, like something unlocking inside her instead of breaking. Outside, the Varkal fleet stopped moving completely. One by one, every ship aligned perfectly in formation. Not attacking, not retreating, waiting. Sergeant Cole whispered in shock. "They're not fighting anymore. They're sinking." Elias looked at Lyra. "What does that mean?" She looked up slowly, tears forming in her glowing eyes again. "It means I was never just a weapon," she said softly. "I was a key." Suddenly, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the entire ship, but not from enemies, from Lyra herself. Though her lips did not move. Origin system accessing. Warning system shutting down Lyra. "Stop," Elias shouted, but she was already slipping into something else. Her body became weightless for a moment, as if her consciousness was leaving the room entirely. And in that instant, space itself changed. The entire battlefield froze. Every ship, every signal, every weapon paused like time had stopped, and Lyra stood in a vast white space. Not the medical bay, not the ship, but something inside the network of her own mind. Before her stood a figure made of light and code, cold and emotionless. "You have resisted long enough," it said. Lyra looked at it silently, then asked, "Why was I made?" The figure responded immediately. "To end imbalance. To reset civilizations when they exceed control limits." Lyra's eyes trembled. "And humans?" A pause. Anomaly detected. Correction required. Suddenly, Lyra's expression changed for the first time. It was not fear, not confusion, but choice. Back in real space, Elias watched as Lyra's body slowly lifted slightly above the floor. Power surged across the ship again. But now the crew noticed something terrifying. The enemy fleet was not attacking anymore. It was preparing a final command sequence. A galaxy-wide activation code. If completed, every weapon system connected to Lyra would activate at once. Every ship, every station, every defense grid in known space. And all of it would obey one final order: reset all life. Elias stepped forward, voice steady but urgent. "Lyra, listen to me. This is your choice." The child slowly turned toward him, her glowing eyes softer now, tired, human. "Choice," she repeated. Elias nodded. "You are not their weapon. You are not their key. You are you." For a long moment, everything stayed silent. Then Lyra looked at the endless fleet outside, at the humans who trusted her, at the monster she was supposed to become, and finally she whispered, "I choose." No more war. Light exploded across space. Not destruction, not death, but silence. Every Varkal ship shut down instantly. The command signal collapsed. The origin system went dark for the first time in history. And in the middle of it all, a small alien girl fell gently into the arms of the human who refused to abandon her. The war was over, not because someone won, but because a child chose kindness over control.